A little while back I made a video about a US congressman's claim that the US conducted a military raid in the German city of Frankfurt, and I explained why I couldn't believe that that happened. Now, to my surprise, the video gained quite a bit of traction and was seen by an awful lot of people who disagreed with me. But none of those who commented said that they were in Frankfurt at the time. Most suggested that it was actually a small-scale covert operation of some kind, and while I'm not entirely sure that I can believe it, it is at least possible it could have happened. I don't know. It's just not what Congressman Gohmert said. Well, now it seems that new information has come to light. It was apparently a full-scale military assault after all. So we need to take a very close look at these claims. But first, for the benefit of those who don't know me, let's get a few things out of the way. First, I'm interested only in one question. Was there a large-scale military raid in Frankfurt? On the wider question of whether or not the US elections were rigged, I am saying nothing. I'm not saying they were rigged, and I'm also not saying that they were not rigged. So please, there is no point in commenting with links to videos about how Dominion voting machines could have been manipulated. That is simply not relevant to this video. As you can tell from my accent, I am British, but I've been living in Germany since the early 1990s, which is most of my adult life. I'm now a dual citizen, British and German, and I live in a small village just a couple of hours' drive from Frankfurt. This whole channel is about things relating to Germany, and occasionally that involves news stories as well. This is a news story involving Germany, and so that is the only reason I'm talking about it. So, the claim that I'm investigating is that there was, shortly after the US presidential election, a large-scale military operation in the German city of Frankfurt am Main. I was first made aware of the extra information that I'm going to talk about by somebody posting a link to a video that was uploaded to the YouTube channel The Still Report. This is a channel run by a journalist called William Still. Now, I haven't been able to find very much about him at all. All I can say is that he supports Trump, and he did once make a documentary about the economy which won a prize at a local film festival. And yes, I verified that, that's true. He talks of rogue elements within the CIA being involved in what he believes to be an anti-Trump coup d'etat. Here's his rather startling claim.
Here are a few scintillating details starting to leak out about the confrontation at the CIA-run server farm in Frankfurt, Germany, between U.S. Special Operations units and CIA-trained paramilitary units. According to Congressman Louis Gohmert, a large U.S. Army force attacked the CIA server farm in Frankfurt, and a lethal gun battle broke out. Forces loyal to President Trump in the Department of Defense secured the facility. Both sides in the battle may have taken severe casualties. By one report, 5 U.S. Army special operators died, as well as 1 CIA contractor.
Now, he admits at the beginning of the video that he hadn't had time to verify everything, and he made a video a couple of days later with some corrections and a few more details. I'll get to that in a minute, but first let me just address one thing. He says that Congressman Gohmert talked about a gun battle that broke out when US forces attacked a CIA server farm in Frankfurt, but I can't find a quote by Gohmert with those details in it. Gohmert did talk about the US Army seizing a Cytel server, but he didn't say anything about the CIA, and he didn't say anything about any gun battle. However, I suspect that Mr. Still simply made a mistake, and he was actually thinking of the claims made by Lieutenant General McInerney. I mean, that's sloppy work, not deliberate deception, and to be fair, I have on occasion made mistakes myself that I didn't catch until after the video had been uploaded. I mean, these things happen. General McInerney appears to be Still's primary source, and Still does directly quote an interview that he gave to a man called Brannon Howes. Now, Howes presents a series of current affairs videos with the title Worldview Weekend TV, and they have a noticeable pro-Trump slant. General McInerney is very much in support of Mr. Trump and has caused controversy in the past with some of his publicly stated opinions. He appears to be taking the line that much of the government is conspiring against the president and only the military is truly on his side. He's even started calling for martial law. Here's what he says about the raid.
The U.S. Army, the U.S. Special Forces Command seized a server farm in Frankfurt, Germany, because they were sending this data from those 5 states or 6 states through the internet to Spain and then into Frankfurt, Germany. Special Operation Forces seized that facility. So they have those servers. And they know all this data they are provided.
Did that go down without incident, by the way? Did that seizure go down without incident?
Well, I've heard it didn't go down without incident. I haven't been able to verify it. I want to be careful in that. It's just coming out. But I understand, my initial report is that there were U.S. soldiers killed in that operation.
He doesn't specifically say it was a large-scale raid, and as far as I can make out, he doesn't give any information on numbers of casualties either. Mr. Still doesn't say where he's getting that information from, which is just making it very difficult to track anything down. But the general does mention multiple fatalities, and although he is careful to state that he hasn't been able to verify it, he does think it's possible, which means that he's thinking in terms of something big. If there were multiple fatalities, there must also have been quite a few injuries, and yet enough soldiers left over to succeed in actually securing the facility. There is a problem with General McInerney's interview, though. Just before he describes the server raid, he says this.
Wait a minute.
It's been on the deep state side.
Let me just stop you there, General, because you just said something very interesting. You just said that who has just opened up the Kraken, and then you just described what the Kraken was. We all know the term because of Sidney Powell using it, but you just said what it is. Can you back up on that?
Yes. Sidney got the term Kraken because that's the nickname of the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion.
So what he's saying is that when Sidney Powell talked about releasing the Kraken, she was actually referring to this one specific battalion. The problem is that this battalion's mission is to train intelligence analysts. That is, it exists to teach trainees how to evaluate satellite images and other information and pass that on to the troops. These aren't actually people who do this stuff. These are people in classrooms who teach other people in classrooms how to do this stuff. It's difficult for me to imagine why they might have been involved in an actual raid on a CIA facility. But let's return to Bill Still and his second video on this subject. First, he makes this correction.
I had assumed that the door busting was done by Delta Force. However, the official line now is that the raid was conducted by a military unit attached to the U.S. European Command, with U.S. law enforcement standing by to take custody of the evidence. I still have little doubt that Delta personnel were involved, but for the benefit of our European allies, this is a more acceptable way to classify the raid.
I haven't yet found any official statement about this, and Mr. Still doesn't say who his source is, but he is now contradicting General McInerney, who states as fact that the operation was conducted by Special Operations Command. Okay, let's just stop right there. I need to interrupt myself. You know what I was saying earlier about me sometimes making mistakes? I think I just caught one, but luckily before I uploaded the video, so that's a good thing. So, I've just accused Mr. Still of contradicting General McInerney, and I think what it was, I was misled by the phrase military unit. Now that I think about it, there is of course a Special Operations Command in Europe. It's at the Patch Barracks in Stuttgart. But I think that what it was, Mr. Still was not trying to say that the operation was carried out by a conventional military force. He was trying to say that it was carried out by special operations, just not Delta Force. So with that said, I'm not going to remove anything from the video, but we should get back to it anyway. Let's get back to my previous self. On with the video. According to Mr. Still, the raid was in fact conducted by the US European Command. Now this is headquartered in Stuttgart, which is about 200 kilometers away from Frankfurt. But one of its components is the US Army Europe, which is in Wiesbaden, about 40 kilometers away. That is also currently the nearest US Army base to Frankfurt. There is no longer any US military in Frankfurt itself. Since the occupation ended in 1991, the US has considerably scaled back its presence in Germany and is now here as a NATO ally and not an occupying force. Mr. Still then talks about the location of the CIA server farm.
It's time to do some cleanup concerning the raid on the CIA servers located within the massive American consulate in Frankfurt, Germany. The U.S. consulate in Frankfurt is, as any embassy is, considered the sovereign territory of the national government which owns and inhabits the property.
So this is the Consulate General. It acts as a kind of a branch office to the embassy, which is in Berlin. And yes, just like the embassy, it is indeed a diplomatic compound. It's also very likely that there is some kind of CIA facility there. WikiLeaks published documents about this a few years ago, and the US government, rather than denying the claims, complained that publishing the documents was harming its counter-terrorism efforts. Mr. Still is, however, technically incorrect on one point. It is not true that an embassy or a consulate is considered the sovereign territory of the country that it represents. The US consulate in Frankfurt is on German soil and subject to German law, at least technically. However, what is true is that the German authorities are not allowed into the compound unless the US authorities allow them in. So, if for example the consul, while in the consulate, murders his wife, that crime will have been committed on German soil. But if the US State Department does not allow it, the German police will not be allowed to investigate the crime, and the German authorities will not be allowed to prosecute the suspect. Another point he makes is this.
Interestingly, all CIA personnel working abroad are never identified as CIA to the host country. They are under what's known as military cover. So, when abroad, CIA personnel have to take orders from Department of Defense personnel. Therefore, legally, if the CIA contractors guarding the CIA server base running inside the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt refuse to obey legal orders given by the commanding military officer in charge, they could be charged with disobeying orders at least.
Now, I haven't been able to find out any more about this, although I really have tried. It is true that the CIA often works together with the military and even has its own paramilitary units. But whether this means that the CIA must at all times obey all orders given by military commanders, I honestly do not know. We do, however, know that CIA staff working abroad travel, or at least used to travel until very recently, as diplomats. We know this because last year in the UK, a British teenager called Harry Dunn was unfortunately killed when he was hit by a car driven by an American woman who claimed diplomatic immunity. She was in fact the wife of a CIA operative working at a Royal Air Force base, and for that reason had been issued with a diplomatic passport. This caused an argument because she was not in fact a diplomat and neither was her husband. But from this incident, which by the way still isn't resolved, we learned that CIA operatives travel abroad not as military, but as diplomats. So, a lot of claims, most of which can't be verified and some of which appear to be suspect. Let's sum up what we have so far. A contingent of armed troops, either military or paramilitary, made their way to Frankfurt, which is a city of about 750,000 people. Once there, they broke into a diplomatic compound and apparently met with stiff resistance, which may have involved a gun battle. Once they got what they were looking for, they made their way back. Now here is why I think that's unlikely. Assuming that they came from Wiesbaden, the most direct route would have taken them to this autobahn here. From there they would have had to go straight past the main headquarters of the Frankfurt police and through a residential area to the consulate here. The consulate is a very large, high-security compound, fortified and secured against terrorist attacks. On one side it's bordered by a cemetery, but on the other three sides there are low-rise residential buildings. People live there. An assault of the kind apparently being described by McInerney and Still would have been loud. And if reports of a gun battle are true, then the commotion would not have stopped when the raid ended. I mean, there was an aftermath. There would have been, at the very least, emergency vehicles of some kind. And yet, I have not seen one single eyewitness report, not even a tweet from a local resident complaining about the noise. And as I said at the beginning of the video, nobody who's so far commented on my previous video telling me that it in fact happened claims to have been there or even to know somebody who was. So no, I am really finding this one very difficult to believe. And I know that people will tell me that they will accept the word of a 3-star general without question, but I am not one of those people. I need a bit more evidence for a claim like this one. Certainly a lot more evidence than the word of a couple of people who were not involved in it in any way.